I was originally going to make a bring these things back to model railroading video. It was going to be a list of things that I want to see return. But after some research, I realized that maybe some of these things never went away. So, where did they go? Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains. Today I am drinking some more of that Kauai coffee. I really like that stuff. If you want to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking and have it featured just like these guys right here, you can leave that in the comments below. And who knows, you might see your comment on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Cheers, guys. Before I begin, my experience is in the North American model train market. I am very aware that things regarding price in markets like the UK, Europe, Australia, and other global markets are very different. Now, the first thing that I do want to address is the whole question of model trains are way more expensive than they used to be. Well, this is not a simple true or false statement here. There is some truth to this, and I do agree that most of what is released today would be classified as mid and high tier models. But it would also be misleading to say that all model trains cost more. It does have something to do with broader economic issues like buying power and wages, and I am not qualified to speak on that as an expert, and also I don't want my comment section to turn into a crapshoot. I'm here to tell you that cheap trains do exist. You just have to frame it around the fact that inflation over time has made everything more expensive. But those super cheap train sets to start someone off do exist, and I'll talk about them later. Let's look at the most popular scale, and that's HO scale. We always see advertisements and posts showing the newest, fanciest, and most detailed locomotives and rolling stock. And these are the ones that have the highest potential to make the most money for a company. Also, let's not forget the fact that our hobby is these companies' livelihood. They're making these trains to put food on the table for their families. This is why we see smaller companies making higher detailed models. A company has to reach a certain size and level of profitability to be able to make less expensive products because lower price demands more to be sold for the product to be profitable. There are a couple companies here in the US that are large enough to make entry level cheap trains in HO scale. Those are mostly Bachmann, WowToyz, Athearn, and Atlas. Now, these aren't not the modern models that you see release announcements for. These are the bread and butter locomotives and rolling stock that have been made for decades. Their tooling is definitely not new, which is part of the cost savings. Bachmann has a host of locomotives that can be found for under $100. For reference, 50 years ago in 1974, that's about the same value as $17. I was able to find over 80 HO scale locomotives for under $100, brand spanking new. WowToyz is the current king of the low price with diesels as low as $65. Athearn also has Roundhouse, which has some $95 locomotives on pre-order. These are not the top of the line locomotives with every detail matching the prototype, and nearly all of them are not DCC. These are simple, ready to run model trains for the person just getting started on a budget. If we look at starter set, Bachmann makes quite a few starting around $120, or about $20 in 1974 money. This is exactly what I see as prices in old catalogs like for JCPenney and Sears. This also applies to rolling stock. In HO scale, WowToyz has trainline rolling stock that can be found for as low as $15 per car or $2.50 in 1974. Atlas has their Trainman rolling stock line that can be found in a similar price range. When you get to around the $20 per car range, that's where the market for both in-scale and HO scale just explodes. If we talk about in-scale, you then get Kato into the mix. You can regularly find Kato DC locomotives for under $100, and because of this, I was able to find well over 100 in-scale locomotives for under $100. Kato are really good quality locomotives too. Kato also makes an entire Unitrek system that is a breeze to set up for DC operation, and the locomotives are easy to convert to DCC. Scale Trains, which does focus primarily on its higher end offerings, does have a line of affordable trains called the Operator Series that can be found regularly for under $100 DCC ready, and they recently acquired Fox Valley models, which they intend to fit in between the Operator and Rivet Counter series in terms of price. Plus, you have brands like Bachmann, Atlas, and micro trains whose items are regularly very affordable. So after looking at all of this, I've come to the conclusion that there are basically three tiers of model railroad product. Budget model trains are what DC is now. They're simple and run on old school DC power packs. Even with these older control systems, a lot of DC model trains run way better than their predecessors from years ago. And most DC trains these days are DCC ready. In terms of rolling stock, you have rolling stock which has mostly molded parts and a basic but sharp paint job. The mid-tier really has two ways that it differentiates itself from the first one. The first is that it has DCC but no sound. It has a basic decoder but not all of the extra features, but it runs DCC. The other part of the tier is, think more detail but still DC. Think of DCC-ready scale trains rivet counters. They're extremely detailed, but they are still DC. Rolling stock at this tier is pretty detailed, but still not quite to the level of 100% accurate miniature versions of the real deal. The third and final tier is the high end. This is where stuff can get pretty pricey. Pretty much every locomotive at this tier has DCC and sound. They'll also be extremely detailed, and the details are highly accurate to the prototype. For rolling stock, you're looking at cars that are exactly like the prototypes, and these cars are usually start in the $40 to $50 per car range. I did have one observation though that really struck me while I was doing all of this research. As I was looking through all the old catalogs of various model train sets and accessories, there was one thing that was really different. A lot of available items were more toy-like and less like the hobby of today. There were lots of functioning accessories, such as places to dump coal, logs, and other items that did not look realistic. Plastic crossings, trestle sets for those famous figure eights with elevation changes. The hobby is in a really different place than it was back then. Model trains has shifted a bit more towards the emphasis of the model side of things. Now, don't get me wrong, you can literally do whatever you want in this hobby. I'm just giving you an explanation of why these types of sets and products aren't made anymore for the most part. Now, let's say you want to get a young kid a toy train to get them interested in the hobby. Who says it has to be specifically to a scale? Let me introduce you to the classic train sets by WowToyz. These sets do not conform to any scale, although they're kind of nestled in between HO and S scale and lean a little bit closer to S scale. They do have some of the hallmarks of the old Tyco sets though. They have trains, track, and accessories. You can even buy some additional rolling stock and track for them if you know where to find it. And I'll link some of that in the description below. These are the spiritual successors to those old train sets. They are tough, simple, and expandable. They're also super cheap. The locomotives are less than $10, even though you have to buy the tender separately for the steam engine, which is kind of weird. Can you use standard products from various scales? I mean, you can, but it's not going to match exactly, but that's not the point. These can spark a passion for model trains the way those old sets did for us in the past. My son has one of these, and he loves it for a toy. I was pleasantly surprised at the build quality, actually. I may have to do something with these. There might be a project in there. Let's not forget about wooden trains too. There's Brio, and you would be amazed at some of the accessories that Brio has. We got my son a signal bridge that changes when you flip the switch on there. Now, Brio can get a little expensive. That's kind of like the name brand, but there's a lot of off-brand stuff as well. Plus, you can find locomotives with real railroads on them, like CSX, Norfolk Southern, all of those. Check some of this out. For instance, my son, he has a Norfolk & Western 611 in wooden train because that is his favorite engine. So there's a lot you can do with wooden trains to inspire a young child to get into model railroading. The point of cheap model trains is to get someone interested in the hobby. And despite what most everyone says, there are still entry points. You just have to look. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.